Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, I am Briareos Kerensky and this is the review of Tokyo Xanadu, Nihon Falcom's latest game for the PSV. Falcom is best known for the Wise and Legend of Heroes series, but long-time gamers might also remember the Xanadu series, started way back in 1985. Tokyo Xanadu, as the name implies, is part of that series, although it forgoes its typical fantasy elements for a present-day setting. Players take the role of Ko Tokizaka, a second-year high school student fixated with part-time jobs. After one of these jobs, he spots one of his classmates, Asuka Iragi, harassed by two thugs. Before being able to do anything, the four are swallowed by a magic portal into an alternate dimension. There Asuka draws a sword and starts to fight nightmarish creatures called Greed. As tradition wants, Ko manifests his own weapon and starts helping Asuka in eradicating these portals. Portals swallow people with strong negative emotions, and a lot of teenager angst is involved in this story.
遅いわよ。だって私、空にあんなひどいこと言っちゃっ。あんたさえいなければ。あんたさえいなければ。
If this premise sounds a lot like the recent Persona games, it is. Nihon Falcom took more than one page from Atlus series and built its own distinct game around it, which is more focused on action parts and linear storytelling than its inspiration. Unfortunately, writers went for a far more cliched approach, with story and characters development never quite reaching the originality and depth of the cast in Persona. This doesn't mean that Tokyo Xanadu's story is badly written, but it surely feels standard and too reliant on elements seen in many shonen anime and manga. Despite that, characters are well-rounded, each given the proper introduction and development, and no one really feels forced into the story. How much you like certain characters is completely up to you though, as I found Asuka, the female lead, rather boring and shallow in both characterization and design. While the story might be cliched, its pacing is excellent, with very few long expository scenes. All cutscenes are made much more enjoyable by the fact that very few of those rely on static portraits. The vast majority involves characters doing something while talking, with multiple point of views to break the monotony. This choice points out to the great care that Nihon Falcom put in the game. There is lip syncing despite mouths being simple textures, and when portraits are involved, eyes and mouth movements is synchronized with the main model on screen. User-defined accessories like glasses pop out on these portraits as well, and if you take a good look at those, you'll notice that those are not completely static and they wobble around with the character's idle animation. The whole graphical presentation is top-notch, with environments receiving the same level of attention as characters. All locations are well modeled and with an abundant use of details to really bring the place to life, giving the whole game a consistent look and feel. This is paid in somewhat long loading times and locations divided into several, relatively small areas, but it's completely forgivable. Unfortunately, the frame rate is around 30 FPS, not a big deal when exploring towns, but it does make combat less responsive than it should be. Ko and crew face dungeons in groups of 3, 2 active and 1 support member. Whoever is in support will recover health over time, but won't participate in special attacks. At any time, players can switch between the 3 members at the press of a button, with the fastest characters being able to continue combos started by others. Who acts under player control is selected at the start of the dungeon. On the same screen it's possible to check elemental weaknesses for enemies there and compose the party based on those. All dungeons have crystals where players can change their equipment, buy basic restorative items and save the game. The 7 characters available are all different and have their own distinct fighting style. Asuka has the best air combos, Yuki and Mitsuki favors ranged combat, Shio is low but powerful, and so on. Combos revolve around close and long-range attacks, and despite having attacks with different properties, the combo structure is shared by everyone. Due to this, the combat isn't particularly varied, but feels good nonetheless. Tokyo Xanadu encourages to switch between characters based on enemies' elemental weaknesses, thus masking the repetitiveness of combat, and rewards players for defeating enemies in the most elaborate way possible. Exploiting their weakness, using air combos, overly powerful blows, or chaining kills together make enemies drop white crystals, the main source of income for the party. Dungeons aren't overly complex, featuring only basic switch-based puzzles to open the only way forward. Later dungeons feature traps and platforming segments to spice up things. The latter are not so well received, the camera is way too close to a character and requires too much manual aiming to get a good understanding of the dangers and where to go, but thankfully jumps don't require a lot of precision to be pulled off. Speaking about the camera, it's not perfectly suited to deal with large or multiple enemies, it sometimes requires too much handling. Enemies can be locked on, but lock can only be established on enemies within the field of view, creating moments where players have to run away, reorient the camera, lock and then continue the fight. It's not a huge problem in itself, but it'd be very easy to fix. Aside from the usual set of clothes serving as armor, each character can upgrade her or his own soul device, the weapon used, in a number of ways. Basic soul device stats, like attack, can be increased up to 3 levels, as can secondary effects like fast healing when in support position or automatic healing spells when the active character's health drops to a dangerous level. All soul devices have a set of slots that can be unlocked and upgraded with the correct items. These slots can be infused with gems and grant bonuses and stat boosts as the situation requires. All characters start with their soul device linked to one particular element, but as the story goes on and co-forms stronger bonds with the cast, they'll be able to change to other elements. Ko is the only one to be able to go through the full spectrum, other characters are limited to 2 or 3 elements. Items to upgrade soul devices are either found or bought, and upgrading everything can be a bit tedious, as you'll have to go to different shops for certain items and then wait for a dungeon or go to a yet different location, when possible, to upgrade. Equipping can be done on the fly. New enemy types are constantly introduced throughout the game, each requiring a different approach. There are enemies that are weak to long or close range attacks, others self-destruct when low on health, and of course some that inflict various status changes. When taken alone, enemies aren't particularly dangerous, but they always come in groups and more often than not these groups are arranged to supplement monster weaknesses. The result is that encounters are always engaging, and players must adapt to the situation at hand with the available characters. There is an over-reliance on the flying dash attack to get multiple, high damage hits and at least 1 kill bonus, but such tactic isn't good against everyone, especially bosses. Bosses are great, every single one offering something new. Their design and tactics get more complex as the game goes on, with the latter encounters showcasing some great ideas. Most bosses don't have an elemental weakness, others change it mid-battle, and everyone requires to use available resources at their best. not every battle is against a single giant beast in a circular arena. One, for example, requires ranged combat to stun the beast and then go for a close range. Some boss encounters highlight that the camera is way too close to the player, making some area attacks and the occasional trap impossible to dodge. Thankfully, with 3 characters and the big crutch of healing items, bosses aren't that tough to crack. In fact, this might be a fault, because later bosses can be quickly worn down through multiple special attacks and then brute force everything by gulping down potions. Basic potions come free, in draws, during dungeons, and you can pretty much rely on those throughout the game. In between dungeons, you mainly play as Ko, going around town, completing side quests and bringing the story forward. Everything is registered in the Near system, an in-game social network, from character bios to side quest progression. Side quests are entirely optional, and the reward is usually money or items. Character subplots are brought forward by interacting with them when they show a yellow exclamation mark during free time segments. During these segments, Ko has a finite number of interactions available. These events rarely need any player interaction, and in game terms they are used to increase a playing character's soul level. Soul levels give characters stat bonuses and allow for combination special attacks. The number of interactions available can be increased by hunting for optional dungeons that pop up around town. These dungeons must be first discovered, but the game is not very subtle about them, marking their location on the world map and giving Ko a handy radar to have the gate appear. In fact, every possible event is clearly marked on the map, and Tokyo Xanadu features a very easy-to-use and detailed map to fast travel around the city, with more complex locations, like the school, having their own map and fast travel capabilities within them. I appreciate this setup, first because I tend to get lost easily, second because it cuts wandering around the same locations over and over to a minimum. Being called Tokyo Xanadu, it'd be safe to assume that there is at least one arcade in the game. And there is, featuring a handful of minigames to get extra items. The whack-a-mole and the fishing games are nothing to speak about, but there is also a rather deep card game to test your skills in. While not a core feature, these minigames use in-game characters and lore, further making the world of Tokyo Xanadu more enjoyable and coherent. It also strengthens the feelings of great care that Nihon Falcom put in the title, that translates to its technical department as well. As said in the beginning, graphics are great and make a good use of the Vita capabilities, though, again, those 30 FPS during dungeons make combat a lot less appealing. Honestly, I would love to see a game with this level of overall detail on a more powerful console running at a decent frame rate, rather than spending resources on the finest looking lighting effects that, in the end, don't add anything to the game. But I digress.
Nanda, Tokisaka ka?
The sound department fares a bit worse than the rest, with some weird moments where only one, newly introduced character has spoken lines while the rest don't. Mixing voiced and non-voiced lines in a single dialogue make the two stride, and I would have gone with one of the two extremes. Anyway, considering how big the primary and secondary casts are, the length of the game, and that this helps in keeping cutscenes' length in check, it's a fair trade-off. Not much to say about the music, some of the fast-paced tracks are nice, but other than that there is nothing that really stands out. What stands out is the large number of free-domain sound effects used, like explosions and lightning bolts. To me, hearing well-known effects was rather jarring, and for some reason stood out more than everything else, and not in a good way. At the time of this review, official word on localization has yet to surface, but Exceed has a good record in bringing Falcom games to the West, and I doubt they'll miss this one. Tokyo Xanadu might not be very original in its structure or story, but games don't need to be original to be good, and Tokyo Xanadu is a quality game that fans of JRPGs should absolutely not miss. I hope you have enjoyed this review and you'll stick around for more. Briareos Kerensky, over and out.
皆さん、お疲れ様でした。